All right, well, we've had a couple more people join. We did have 20 people registered for tonight's event, but it's 5:33, so I think we should probably get started, and we'll start just with introductions and hopefully some more folks will be coming through and joining us. Welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time today to join us. This is a session, a virtual session just to check in on some plans that the city had been working on. Tonight's session is specific to the Northwest Quadrant and Lake Section office for a new facility up at the corner of Lake Avenue and Westridge Road for a new Lake Section RPD office co-located with a Northwest Quadrant Neighborhood Service Center. My name is Elizabeth Murphy. I'm with the city's planning office, and I'm joined by a few colleagues here that will be facilitating the session tonight. We're working with partners at Highland Planning and the Clementine Gold Group, doing these outreach sessions on this site and another one, a similar facility that was being planned for East Main Street. And we'll just go through some introductions now, and we'll be turning it over to Highland to walk us through the session evening. So again, I'm Elizabeth Murphy with the city's planning office, and I'm here with my colleague, Kevin Kelly, the manager of planning.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin. Glad you all could be here tonight, and hopefully some more folks will be able to join us. And as Elizabeth said, our planning office is teaming up with some consultants here in town to just reach out and hear from folks about these sites. So we look forward to hearing from you about the different possibilities for these sites as things have evolved over time. Andre?
Hi, my name is Andre. I am a planner with Highland Planning, Rochester native, and I'm just really excited to walk everyone through everything today. That's going to be my role, is just taking your questions and going ahead and also presenting sort of the context for the site. I'm also joined by two people from Clementine Gold, based out of Buffalo. One is Ikua and one is Kim. Kim, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sure. I'm Kim LeVere. I'm from Clementine Gold Group, and we are just working with Highland Planning and the city's planning office to just really hear what you all have to say.
Thanks. And Ikua?
I don't think she's back in the building yet.
Okay. Ikua will be taking notes and doing some things behind the scenes just to make sure that we have everything recorded at this meeting. Also, this meeting is being recorded overall, so you should have gotten a little notification saying recording in progress when you logged in. So I'm going to go ahead and just explain kind of what the agenda is for this meeting, so everyone is on the same page. I'm going to go ahead and go through this presentation. This is the same one that you may have seen if you attended one of our in-person open house meetings or one of our pop-up events, or if you looked on the project webpage and saw the video, or clicked on the PDF link of this. We're trying to keep everything consistent, so this is the same presentation. We might go a little more in depth than we have in person on this, because we have a little more time, but we are going to go through that to make sure you have the context. And then we are going to go ahead and take questions through the Q&A field. Everyone who is logged in right now should be able to see a Q&A button. You can click on that and you can ask questions. You can ask questions as I'm talking. You don't need to wait until after the presentation. Those questions will all be saved up and we'll go back and look at them. And we will be here until either we run out of time or we run out of questions, depending on which comes first. I want to take a minute to mention that while we're going to be talking about your questions, and those are going to be recorded as part of this whole process, still the best way to share your input on this process is through the survey. And so we really want to make sure everyone has a chance to fill out that survey. We've been trying to share it broadly. So do take the survey online if you have not yet done that. I know some of you were able to come to the pop-ups and do those in person. And please do share the survey online to your community through your email lists on social media and things like that. I just went ahead and posted that link. Elizabeth did as well in the chat field, so you can go ahead and click on that and share that anywhere you like. So let's go ahead and get started on the presentation. So we're going to be talking about the future of these development sites on Lake Ave and East Main Street. Again, we're focused on the Lake Ave site, but I'm going to give you the context for both sites today. So how did this all begin? Well, first of all, in 2015, or prior to 2015, the city was split into two halves as far as RPD beats, RPD sections. There was an east section and a west section. That meant that any particular officer could be anywhere on the east or anywhere on the west on their shift, depending on where they were needed. In 2015, shortly after Mayor Warren was elected, she asked for them to move towards a community policing model. And so pursuant to that, they decided to make smaller sections and have 5 smaller sections rather than the 2 large sections. And those sections would have smaller beats inside them, with the intention being that officers would be in the same beats every day, so they would get to know those communities better and be able to have a better connection with those communities. So they went ahead and made these 5 sections: Lake, Clinton, Goodman, Central, and Genesee. And when they did that, you can see that there are on this map 3 green dots. Those were the existing RPD offices. So there was an existing office in the Clinton section, an existing office in the Central section, and an existing office here at the north end of the Genesee section. There was no office for the Goodman section and none for the Lake section. Currently, officers who are serving the Goodman section will begin their shift at the Clinton office and drive into their car beat on the Goodman section. And similarly, officers who are serving in the Lake section will begin their shift at the Genesee office and drive north into the Lake section to their car beat. So they decided to build 2 new stations, one for each of these sections. And that was from about 2016 to 2018. They spent a lot of time working on that. They looked at about 25 different sites for each section. They did a needs assessment based on what were the needs for a new RPD office, including space that was needed for all the officers' materials and things like that. And they went ahead and used that information to check it against all the different sites that were available. They checked sites that were existing buildings that could be rehabbed. They checked sites that could be totally new construction. They looked at areas where the city could lease facilities. And after all of that, they found 2 specific sites. Now, during that time, they also realized that the neighborhood service centers, specifically the neighborhood service center for the Northwest and for the Southeast, each also had some deficiencies in their facilities. One of the main ones was that they didn't have as much meeting space, community meeting space, as they would have liked. And they wanted to make sure that they had space to have community meetings at the neighborhood service center sites. And so the idea was to co-locate the neighborhood service centers with the RPD offices so that they could have a new site for both of those city services. So they found 2 sites. One here is the site on Lake Ave and West Ridge Road. This is known to longtime Rochesterians, perhaps as the Peeler Pontiac site. This is it has 2 addresses. There's 2 parcels here, 1540 and 1560 Lake Ave. And the site that they found for the Goodman section was 1200 to 1252 East Main, and 1 to 10 Laura Street. So this is on East Main Street behind AutoZone Auto Parts, a formerly contaminated site or a cleaned up brownfield site, and the adjacent parcels that included part of Laura Street here. So after selecting those sites and recognizing that those sites would be good for the combined NSC and RPD stations, they began to do some public outreach. There were 2 public meetings held, one for each of the areas, and generally the feedback was positive. There was some discussion at both of them on pros and cons, but people generally thought that it would be good to have the new station in their area, the people who attended the meetings. And so they decided to begin moving forwards. As the city began moving forwards, there was a, I'm hearing that my audio is breaking up a little. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video just to make sure that you can hear me clearly. Okay. So the city decided to begin moving forwards. So the East Main site moved forwards much more quickly than the Lake Ave site, because the East Main site had less significant cleanup requirements. The Lake Ave site has a brownfield, and there is still ongoing cleanup as part of that process. The city is still acquiring that land, and so as they are acquiring that land, they're acquiring that land after it's been through the brownfield cleanup process. So because of that, that process moved along a little more slowly, and East Main was moving forwards more quickly. East Main was moving forwards quickly enough that they began to make some designs, and they were completing their final design in June 2020, and the site was ready for construction by August 2020. You can see here a preliminary site plan for the Lake Ave site. Again, this is very preliminary, just to give a sense of the general layout here, with a building at the southern end and parking to the north, with entrances up here on Redwood Road rather than trying to get in onto Ridge Road. Here is a much more final site plan concept for the RPD section in the Goodman section, for the RPD office in the Goodman section. This one you can see has a community room here at the front, and it has is surrounded by some parking lots here. And this is a rendering, a final building design concept rendering for the building that was to be built on East Main Street. You can see this blue area in the front. That was the expanded meeting space that the NSC requested. Now, again, everything was ready, and for East Main, and the funding was approved in August of 2020. In September of 2020, City Council repealed its funding approval for the construction of the Goodman section office after learning about the death of Daniel Prude. And so under that, based on all of the political climate going on and some of the protests going on, once that funding was repealed, the city decided to freeze both of the projects, just to take a pause and give it some time. And so the process on the Lake Ave was frozen as well. And so both of these sites are just as they were when that vote was taken. Currently, RPD is still operating out of its 3 existing section offices, as I mentioned before. And so what we're doing is we are now coming back around to ask how people are feeling about these sites and what they're interested in doing. Now, there are about 4 different options for these sites. 2 of them are the preferred options. There are 2 other options that are not preferred, and we'll talk about why. Basically, The first option is to move forward with the previous plan, going ahead with constructing the RPD offices and the NSC offices at these sites, using the plans for East Main that were already completed, and moving forward with completing plans for the Lake Ave site. For the East Main site, that would require doing some bidding out again, finding a company to construct it and things like that. And for the Lake Ave site, this would require further public meetings. There were about 5 more public meetings held for the East Ave site than for the Lake Ave site because it was moving further along. And so similar outreach and design would need to be done for the Lake Ave before it was constructed. Another idea is to modify the previous plan and build new sorts of facilities with a new mix of city services. In addition to RPD and NSC services, there's lots of other city services that could benefit from being located in the community rather than at City Hall. Department of Recreation and Human Services has some functions that might be able to be there, such as some of their animal services functions. There's lots of different things that could be there. And if you take a look at the survey, there is a question where we ask about some of those different options and what you would like. And so that's another way to do this, is to have a different mix of city services, which may or may not include RPD services. If it did not include RPD services, then RPD would continue to operate out of those 3 existing facilities that we mentioned. The other 2 options are the ones that we would not like to see moving forward, and we don't think the community would like to see moving forward. One is to leave the land vacant. These sites have all been vacant for a while. They were contaminated, and that's why they were being cleaned up. And so because of that, they've been vacant, and there has been a sense in the community that it would be good to put something there. And so leaving these vacant is not something that city would like to do. We'd really like to move forward with some sort of development. It is also possible to have a private developer redevelop these sites. Unfortunately, these sites are both do still include contamination, although they were cleaned up through the brownfield program. They are not to the level where most of the sites are not to the level where you would want to build residential. You wouldn't want to build housing or anything there. You could build some industrial or commercial buildings there, but it may be best in that case, or it would be best in that case probably to build something that is a city facility, because that's kind of what the original plan was. And so to build something that's a city facility, but to understand, do we want to move forward with the city facilities that were previously planned, or do you want to make a new type of city facility and put it here? That's sort of the question we're coming out to the public, right now. So now we come around to you. We are, this is going to be the last of a whole series of outreaches that we've done. We've done 4 pop-up events. We've done 2 public meetings in person. This is the second of 2 virtual public meetings. And we are leaving the survey open until the first week of October, because we really want to make sure that everyone has a chance to weigh in on this. We've been sending that around to all the neighborhood groups in the areas and things like that. So we're hoping that people will have a chance to really share their opinion and share their idea on this. At the end of the process, this is going to result in a report that is going to be rounded up and submitted to the mayor's office, saying this is how people are feeling. This is not any sort of referendum or something where, if we get a certain amount of survey responses one way or another, then a decision is going to be made based on that. This is just an understanding of how people are feeling and what people's opinions are about these sites, so that it can be used to hopefully inform a decision in the future. So I see that we have 2 questions coming up already.
Yes, we have a couple questions. Did you want me to go ahead and start that process?
Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. So the first question is from Patty, and Patty is asking, why would the city select 2 heavily contaminated locations as sites for these offices?
So this is Elizabeth from the city's planning office. And basically what we'll do during this, the Q&A section here is, as you all submit your questions, I or Kevin or Andre will do our best to answer them. For this question, as Andre was explaining, we went through a needs assessment process that looked at many different sites across the city for these facilities. And in the Northwest quadrant, I think it was 25 different sites that were considered and sort of scored on a matrix. And there were a number of different criteria that we were looking for. At a minimum, needed to meet the operational and staffing, safety and security access needs for RPD and NSC staff and facilities and customers. But then also looking for a site that would be centrally located within the geography served and very visible and accessible. And a goal of the cities was also to, if possible, to be able to redevelop vacant, underutilized land in a highly visible, accessible location. So it certainly wasn't the goal to be looking for contaminated sites. But this particular site in the Northwest quadrant was the best to balance the various criteria that we were looking for. It does happen to have contamination, but a very good thing that there are some state programs like the Brownfield Cleanup Program out there that help to address environmental conditions with sites. And so that site is currently working through some of its environmental issues and cleanup. And nothing would be developed there until certain milestones and criteria are reached in that process.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I just want to mention, in general, I think that, I mentioned before that we have heard that people don't want these sites to just remain empty. People don't like seeing empty lots in their neighborhoods. And, while they are contaminated, they have been or are in the process of being cleaned up. There are different levels to which they're cleaned up, and there's certain thresholds where you can clean something up clean enough that you're willing to put a house there, or you can clean something up clean enough that you're willing to put a commercial building there. And so those are they're being cleaned up to that second threshold, ready for a commercial building. And so I think that in general, the city, and Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, but in general, the city does try to take advantage of cleaning up and building on sites like that around the city where they can, rather than just leaving them empty and contaminated.
Absolutely. I mean, our goal, there's resources that are involved in environmental cleanup. So whenever it's possible to participate in state programs or initiatives that provide some degree of funding for that, that's great. But it's absolutely our goal to be able to redevelop vacant land wherever we can and clean up property, be able to do that.
Awesome. Thank you. We have some feedback from an anonymous attendee around the development of the survey itself. The question is, why is the survey inclusive of both police substations? Each neighborhood should have a say in their own neighborhood and not each other's. And that was some feedback from that attendee.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And we did in the design of the survey, and Andre may be able to speak to this as well. There are separate questions for each parcel. And we did ask, I think it's the zip code that people live in, to try to be able to match where people are with their input for a specific site location. And we're also, interested generally in gathering community members' input on whether they think that the idea of locating a police section office in their neighborhood makes them feel safer, makes them feel less safe, isn't something that they feel strongly about. So we wanted to design it in a way that any city resident would be able to participate, and that we could gather more specific, location specific input from residents of the two geographies to be served by these facilities.
Yeah, I just want to note, there is a this isn't a referendum or anything. There's not going to be, this isn't voting on whether or not these are going to be built. This is gathering information about how people are feeling in different areas about different aspects of these sites. And so we didn't want to restrict that. We wanted to be able to gather as much information about about people's opinions as possible. And so that is all going to be teased out. That is going to say, this is what people with this zip code thought. This is what people with this zip code thought. This is what people who say they live in this neighborhood thought. And so that's all going to be, as in addition to, this is how people are feeling citywide. So that's all going to be kind of separated so we can understand the differences between those. Because, like I said, this is the last of 6 now different events that we've been going out and doing. And I have definitely heard different things in different areas. It's not all just the same across the whole city. So it's going to be part of the understanding the results is that we're understanding the differences in the different areas.
Thank you. We have a question from William, and it states that both the police and other city departments are in current facilities. The Northwest NSC office just moved into new offices. Other than the community policing model, please explain what advantages to city staff, efficiency, or public convenience would be accomplished by this building.
So, yep, you're right that right now, Lake section officers are reporting out of the J Street office, which has been their, long time office location. And the Northwest Quadrant NSC did recently move into new to them offices at 400 Dewey. I guess first to speak to the RPD issue, the goal for this new facility was to have an office that would be more centrally located within the lake section geography. And so moving it further north, the thinking was that would help to balance, the range of locations that officers need to report to north and west and south across the geography. So that was the desire there, as well as I think there are some operational things about just having newer facilities, having certain offices with more privacy for certain types of work that RPD officers have to do, et cetera. For the NSC office, their main desire was to have more and better community meeting space, certainly to be able to host, neighborhood association meetings, but also to be able to better host other types of neighborhood serving events like job fairs and things like that, which their prior offices on Parkway and their current new office at 400 Dewey do not have. And I think I saw that Tammy Heron, the Northwest Quadrant Administrator, is here. Andre or Okua, is it possible to unmute Tammy if she wanted to just be able to speak as an expert on in her own area of what they were hoping to be able to accomplish with the new Northwest Quadrant office facility?
Yes, I can do that. Tammy, are you prepared to do that?
Absolutely.
If you'd like to.
I have no problems with that. I would definitely like to speak to that, especially as far as the NSC side. So if anyone is familiar with the net office, originally we were net office. Anyone that's familiar with that has ever come into a net office can definitely attest and agree that our spaces have always been pretty tight, if you will, and not being able to have enough space to accommodate the things that we need to do. So on the NSC side, what we wanted to do was, and you're exactly right, about having some space for community events, having outreaches. Not only that, but we wanted to provide space where people could come in, use the computer and do job searches, look for housing, because we get a lot of phone calls. Can you send me a list for rental apartments, or can you print this out for me because I'm unable to do so. I'm trying to get a job. So what we wanted to do is provide a space for people to help them to become self-sufficient and be able to come in, use the computer, be able to print something out, be able to fax something. A lot of times other resources or other facilities don't have the accommodation. So those are the things that we wanted to do. We definitely was community driven. Also, our neighborhood service centers have always been tucked away, if you will, on a side street or in another building. We wanted to have something that will be welcoming to the community from the right of way. People could see that, if you wanted to come sit and have lunch, you would have a nice space to do so safely. If I can say so, definitely safely. You will be behind a wrought iron fence. If you wanted to take a walk, a nice little brisk walk, you would be able to do that, not just the community, but for the staff as well, because we've been unable to do that. And just really community driven is what we were really looking for, and being able to have the space so people would be able to have some privacy, to do that. Because now when they come into our office, if someone comes in behind them, they're able to hear what's going on. Some people's concerns are personal. Sometimes they need to be private. With having that type of facility with enough room to be able to do so would not only accommodate us, but it would also accommodate what we could provide for the community as well.
Thanks, Tammy. That's helpful.
Thanks, Tammy. And we actually had, Jonathan, we were asking if you could put your question in the chat box, but we'll read that out loud just for folks to hear your feedback. Jonathan stated that, like the 5-Star Bank on West Falls Road, can there be community rooms that approved nonprofits and neighborhood groups could use at night? At that 5-star location, once approved to use a room, you would be given a code to access the room and bathrooms. You use a door that doesn't give you access to the entire building.
So that sounds more like a comment than a question. I don't think I really have an answer to it, but thanks for writing that comment in, and we can document that as input that we received from this session. And I see that Celia, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your last name correctly, Igboeli, has her hand up. Celia, the format for tonight, we're asking folks to write questions into the Q&A tab. So if you have, and it could be a comment too, we can read your comment out loud, or if there's a question, if you type it in there, we'll do our best to answer it.
And if anyone else has any questions, feel free to go ahead and drop that in the Q&A section so we can answer that for you.
And it looks like Jonathan is multitasking, but we're the benefit of it because he's sharing information about youth employment training. So thanks for sharing that information. If there are more details that you'd like to share in the chat, feel free to put them in there, and then everyone will benefit.
Okay. We did get another question from William. Is a traffic signal for the Redwood Road Lake intersection contemplated? If so, what kind?
That I do not know the answer to.
Yeah, I think that
we could go back and check with folks in architecture and engineering. I don't remember that being mentioned in any of the background information that we were gathering for this.
I think that we may not have gotten that far in the process. I think that this I think was developed by Architectura kind of in the initial phase of selecting these sites. And so getting deeper into exactly what that would look like, I think had not yet been done. And they had done sort of just a basic understanding of, we want the entrance on Redwood and Lake rather than on West Ridge for traffic reasons. So
correct. And that's a really good point that Andrea is making, that between the two sites that we're doing input for in this opportunity, the East Main Street location for the Goodman section office is much further along in their final design and being ready to go to bid and construction. So for the Lake Avenue site, because of some of the environmental conditions, the city hasn't actually finished the acquisition of both parcels. We own one and the other is in process. We have a contract to purchase it, subject to certain conditions. And so once once that happens, if there's, clear community support and a decision is made at some future point to move forward with that facility, there would have to be, a series of public meetings and a lot of additional study and design work that's done to come to a site plan, a preliminary site plan, a final site plan, a building design concept, all of those kinds of things. And so this question that Bill is asking now is probably something that would be resolved at that point, if and when we were to get to that point.
Okay, let me see. The next question from Jill. I'd like to, or it might be a statement, I'd like to see some of the parking used for recreation purposes such as basketball. NSC should offer one-stop services as well as recreation. Thank you for that
Great,
feedback.
yep. Yeah, that sounds like a comment. So thanks for that feedback. Not a question to answer, but we will take note of that and the input that we're receiving for tonight's event.
And I also want to highlight your comments here are great, but we do also want to see those in the survey. So please do, if you haven't had a chance yet, fill out the survey in addition to providing your comments to us here.
Any other questions? Feel free to drop them in the Q&A.
Celia, it looks like you still have your hand up. Are you able to use the Q&A function or, oh, I think she put it down. Oh, she put it back up. Yes, Celia, are you able to use the Q&A function on the on Zoom on the button at the bottom, or are you having trouble with that? You can put a question in the chat as well if the Q&A is giving you trouble.
William also posted some comments in the chat box, just to read those out loud for folks. You may want to check with the engineering department. The traffic control board tends to strongly dislike traffic signals very close together, and there's already signals at Ridge and Keel next north.
Yeah, I don't know if there
then,
has already been I don't think they got as far as any like traffic study stuff for Lake Ave. So I think that's all yet to be done, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably a comment. And as we were sort of explaining earlier, I think we're not that far along in the process here. So that's something that, we'd have to look at if and when we got to the point where more formal site plan and other designs are being done.
Okay, Barbara is asking a question. When will the survey results be made public?
So the survey is open, I think, through October 6th. Is that right, Andre?
Yes. Yep, that's correct.
Okay, great. So we're keeping the survey open through the 6th of October. And then Highland will be working with Clementine Gold folks to summarize all of the input that we received, probably through the next month or so, and doing a write-up of all the input gathered.
Yeah, so I would say late October probably is the goal for that. And that should include this. I don't think we're going to put the survey results as such, as in like, you're not going to see every single person's answer with their email address and all that, because that obviously there are.
Yeah, no.
Obviously there are privacy things with that. We're going to provide a summary of what we heard from the survey with some analysis based on area and stuff like that.
Okay, any other questions? All right, another question from Jonathan. Will there be further meetings once the design of the building is starting to be discussed?
So at this point, there are no active plans to move forward. Everything's kind of on hold or on pause. As Andre was explaining, The East Main Street facility had been further along in its final design and readiness to go out to bid for construction. And that was, initially council approved the funding for that last year, and then last September, so really just a year ago, they revoked funding for that. And since that point in time, work for both of these sites has been on hold, on pause. So there's no active planning to move forward with this at this point. And that's why we're here doing outreach. It's been a year. And so we're trying to check back in with community members, with residents, business owners around these two previously planned sites to see what people would like to see if they want us to move forward or not. But there's no decision on the table currently to do that or not do that. We're just trying to take the community pulse. So if a decision is made at some point to move forward with the facility on Lake Avenue and West Ridge Road, yes, we would have to do a lot of outreach and community engagement to help inform that design.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? There was also a question in the chat. And if you all could put those in the Q&A section, if not, we'll read them from the chat, but if you could put them in the Q&A section, it'll allow us to keep track and everyone will be able to see the answered ones. William commented, what is the feature, or the question, what is the feature on the site map that's directly south of the proposed building? Is it a pond or water feature?
I don't think that's a pond.
So,
I think that, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Andre.
I was gonna say, I think that that just says landscape feature. I don't think it's it's decided. Again, this is very preliminary. I think the purpose of that, if I remember correctly, has something to do with shielding from some of the traffic and sound and all that stuff going down Ridge Road. That's kind of why they have that line of trees there, and maybe something they're just saying put some landscaping here to kind of buffer the building a little bit from some of that traffic. If I remember correctly, that's what that is.
Yeah, but a very key point to keep in mind would be that this was a preliminary concept for a site plan design. It's not a proposed site plan. It's not a final site plan. So there's a lot of engagement and more detailed design work that would need to take place before we could really say, here's what's being, proposed.
All right, we have an anonymous question that came in. The question is, would it be possible to make the facility a neighborhood service center without a police station?
So, that's a good question. I think if your input is that that's what your preferred alternative would be, I'd encourage you to write that in. At this point, as we've been saying, there's no firm decision on the table. We're really just looking for people's input and ideas on what you would like to see. So if that's what you would like to see, we would love to take your input.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, again, if you pull up this presentation on the city website, you can see those 4 options, and the 2 main options are continue as it is or continue with a different mix of city services, which could include or could not include different amounts of RPD services. So
I'm having a really hard time hearing you, Andre.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just trying to summarize those 2 options. It could be a implement as was planned, or it could have a new mix of city services. So those are the 2 main options. And
well, I would want to clarify that a little bit. I don't think that those are just the 2 main options. That's what we're looking for people's input on
yes.
through this opportunity. So, we're interested to know, are you supportive or not supportive of moving forward as previously planned? And or is there some other combination of city services that you would prefer to see at this particular site? And so we're interested in hearing your input on those options. I don't think they're not necessarily the only options out there, but it's what we're trying to gather input on and community perspective on through this.
Yeah.
Okay, Patty asked a question. What do we as community association board members tell our people who believe the Lake Section RPD office is extremely necessary and immediately wanted?
If that is your input, then I hope you've filled out the survey to share it. And if you haven't, please do go. We have the survey link, I think, listed up above in the chat. I know that Andre will also be sending out again to all the neighborhood associations and business associations in the Northwest quadrant and the Southeast quadrant, resharing that survey link because we have a couple weeks left before it closes. So, just share it with folks in your associations. I will just say, there are many different ideas and opinions out there. So there may be people within your associations that have a different opinion or idea than you. And we do want to hear from any and everyone who would like to share their perspective.
We have another question from Jose. Do we have data as to how many jobs this would potentially create and or how the immediate surrounding neighborhood might be financially impacted by this build out of a police substation with an NSC office?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have an answer to that, unfortunately. Again, for this particular site, because it wasn't as far along as East Main, it wasn't like in final stages and ready to bid, and we hadn't received bids to get a sense of how different firms were coming in, the number of people that they would have proposed to have on the job, et cetera. I'm not able to answer that question, but it is a good question.
Yeah, I think, there's the potential for, obviously, for some construction jobs, but in terms of long-term jobs, as far as we know, we're just looking at NSC office staff potentially relocating, and RPD staff potentially relocating, but not necessarily resulting in new jobs. And in terms of, a financial impact on, on the neighborhood, be pretty difficult to quantify something like that, and it isn't necessarily in the scope of work for this project to do that.
Okay, we have another question from Barbara. What type of contamination is at the lake site, water or soil? How is it being cleaned up? Is the contamination from Kodak or Filer Pontiac?
So that's Peeler Pontiac, and sorry, that's probably a Rochesterian pronunciation.
For sure.
So great question. There's pretty complicated environmental issues at these sites, and I do not know all of the details of them, but the parcels they're enrolled in the state's brownfield cleanup program. So there's the state has a very prescriptive process for reviewing all of that and establishing milestones and working to address issues. So, the site is officially enrolled in the state's brownfield cleanup program, which is through the DEC. And it's being cleaned up to what is considered to be a commercial or industrial standard, which means that when the cleanup is done, commercial or industrial uses can be developed and used on the site. And there will be, as part of the brownfield cleanup program, there's ongoing monitoring for environmental conditions at the site. So it's important to communicate that the site is being cleaned up, and there'll be ongoing monitoring.
Okay, we have another question from William. The city currently has a lot of problems and needs, including lots of infrastructure, housing, green space, recreation centers, especially in the Northwest. Why does the city feel that this building is the best use of limited city money?
I can take this one unless you want to.
I can add when you're done, but I defer to Kevin.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for starters, we're not stating that we feel that this is the best use of money at this point. We think that it's an option that's worth exploring. So we really want to hear from the community. And then there are a number of other factors that would go into that. But the city is heavily investing in lots of those other things that you mentioned. But it's of course, there's always scarce resources, and we never have as much as we would like to invest to address those things. But for sure, there's been an identified need through the police department and through the neighborhood service center. There's an identified need in terms of facilities and in terms of where they're located, currently not very centrally located to their sort of quadrant jurisdiction. So, you know, then it becomes a question of, is it worth it to spend this money to address that need? And that's what we're all trying to explore together.
Jose asked, will the findings from these input sessions be presented to current mayor or not completed until the new mayor is sworn in?
No, so the goal is to, as I said, the survey will be open through October 6th. And then over about the next month, we'll be working with Highland to write up and summarize the input. And then we'll be sharing that with Mayor Warren. And, you know, we'll also share it with the new administration when they come into office, which is obviously a few months down the road. But the goal would be to complete a summary of input by mid-fall.
Okay, anonymous attendee had wrote, I'm a neighbor who has experienced trauma at the hands of the police. I would have to drive by the station daily, and I'd rather not do that. I'd like to work through more of my terrible experiences with the RPD, but I don't have access to mental health treatment as I'm essentially uninsured. I'd much rather see the city invested in making mental health treatment more accessible to residents rather than building this new police station, and comments about benefits and hoping for better health insurance. So I don't know if anyone wanted to answer that or just comment about, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing your comment. And I'm so sorry for whatever your experience was. You know, I think that this sounds more like a comment than a question. So thank you for sharing it. And I want you to know that this will be, you know, it's being documented as part of this process. So thank you for sharing that input.
I also want to note that when you do the survey, one of the first questions is, would having a police station in your neighborhood make you feel more or less safe? And this is the sort of sense that we're trying to get at with that question is what is the kind of emotional and mental impact? Does it make you feel, does it increase your quality of life, make you feel more safe, or does it, you know, decrease your quality of life, make you feel less safe by having it in your area? And so please do fill out the survey and give us that feedback.
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead and put that in the Q&A part.
Thank you so much for all your questions so far. I do want to note, someone had asked about details on the Lake Ave site. If you go to the New York State website and you type in the code for this area for the Lake Avenue site, you can pull that all up, and it has every detail you could possibly want. And it also says that that the documents are all at the Maplewood Community Library. So I'm posting the code in the chat there. So if you wanted to check that out on the state website, you can do that. But you can also just head over to the Maplewood Library if you want to get some background on exactly, you know, what the whole.
And Andre, you cut out again with that comment. If you could just put that in the chat group for folks to reference that resource.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounded like Andre was going to be sharing a link. So if you can just explain what the link is, Andre, along with the link, that would be great in the chat.
Yep,
and it
I can
looks
do
like
that.
there maybe were other comments in the chat.
Yes, there was a comment from William in the chat that there's a concern that if the NSC and police station are combined, people who are reluctant to interact with the police may avoid going to the NSC office. And then the next comment from William was perhaps a combination NSC and recreation center would be better.
Yep, so those sound like comments, not questions. I don't have an answer, but thank you for sharing your comments, and those are being noted as part of this input.
We don't have any other questions, but if folks do, feel free to pop those in the Q&A. And we will definitely make notes of the comments as well. Any other questions? It's been some great feedback. Anything else that the panel wants to add?
I don't think so. We're here as long as people have questions. So if you have anything else on your mind, a question that you'd like to ask or a comment that you'd like to share in the chat, I'd like to invite you to do that. And if people don't have other questions for now, we can wrap up early. But we wouldn't want to, we want to give you a chance to think through your thoughts and ask us anything that's on your mind.
So Andre shared a link about getting information on the Lake Avenue site cleanup. If you visit that site, that's posted in the chat. Any other questions? Give a couple more minutes. And again, the survey link is in the chat as well. So feel free to take that survey if you haven't. Like stated before, we are taking the comments and summarizing those at the end of the survey period. So it's definitely important to get that feedback from folks. Elizabeth, you're muted.
Thank you. And also, feel free to share the survey link with your neighbors or other folks in your neighborhood groups or business associations or other ways that you're organized in your neighborhood, because we want to hear from everyone who would like to share their input.
So it doesn't look like there's any other questions.
Okay. I think we'll give it another minute or two. And then if we're not seeing more questions or comments, oh, something popping up.
Just thanking us for our time, and the presentation is informative. Thank you for that feedback.
Yes, I think we'll just wait for another minute or two, and if we don't hear from others, then thank you so much for your time. And if you haven't taken the survey yet, please do and share with folks in your networks. And all right, it's been another minute. Not seeing anything else. I think maybe we should wrap up. Thank you all so much. And have a great evening and take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thank you.